Kicking off what might have been Sony's greatest E3 conference was the game that I was the most excited to see, and this was the new God of War. It was awesome to see a live orchestra play the soundtrack to introduce the game, and I hope this becomes more of a thing at E3 press conferences from now on. The soundtrack is composed by Bear McCreary, who is known for his past work on Battlestar Galactica and The Walking Dead, among many other TV shows and films. Of course, the game looks incredible from a visual standpoint. I wasn't surprised by that at all, considering what they achieved with God of War 3 and Ascension on the PlayStation 3. The God of War games have always been technical marvels, and this one is going to be no different. I can only imagine what it's going to look like on the Neo. Now, before I go any further, it's important to note that this is not a reboot. It is actually a sequel that takes place many years after the events of God of War 3. What we see is a much older Kratos that has started afresh after the events of that game, who now has his own family again. It seems like his new family has helped him to make a more profound change that would ultimately result in a very different Kratos to the one that we've come to know in the previous games. So let's address the elephant in the room first. They didn't take the route I thought they were going to take, even though it's quite a similar idea. If I didn't see the words Spartan Rage, I would have assumed that it was another version of Kratos in an alternate universe because of how different everything looked. And I didn't notice this until I watched the trailer in better quality, but if you look closer at his forearms, you can see marks of where the Blades of Chaos were tied to his skin. They even brought in a different voice actor to replace T.C. Carson, and it was recently announced that Christopher Judge would be doing the voice and the motion capture for Kratos. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first, because T.C. Carson was iconic in that role, and it's almost like replacing David Hayter as the voice of Snake. Luckily, there isn't a huge difference between the old and the new like there was with Snake, and Judge fits well enough into the role of an older, more subdued version of Kratos for fans to overlook it. Even as someone who loved Kratos in the other games, I didn't previously see what else they could do with him after 6 games, but they have slowly won me over. I get why they didn't want to go in the direction of an alternate universe / reboot, because they said they didn't want to retell his origin story. They said they wanted to explore what would happen if an immortal demigod like Kratos decided to change. It's also more congruent with the last scene in God of War 3. As you guys will remember, there was a phoenix symbol on the ground of where his body lay which signified rebirth, and it was shown that he disappeared in the end credits scene. Cory Barlog said that for Kratos, this change means breaking the cycle of violence, distrust and deception that his family, the Greek pantheon, perpetuated for so long. It was a cycle that drove a whole host of bad decisions. It also means learning how to control his rage, the intensely turbulent monster that lives within him, steering him down ever darker paths. Kratos needed to figure out how to put the monster back in the box and how to control when he does and doesn't let that monster out. So it seems like his rage and how he learns to control it is going to play a huge part in the game. Hopefully it paves the way for a more interesting struggle to play out as we get to see a more human Kratos. They tried to humanize him more in Ascension and it didn't work quite as well as they wanted, but it seems like they've succeeded with this one. We have already told the story of the Hulk, we now want to tell the story of Bruce Banner, was the statement that resonated with me the most. There are still tons of unanswered questions though. We don't know how he managed to survive after impaling himself with the Blade of Olympus, what's happened to Athena, and what's happened to the Blades of Chaos. It also seemed like the whole world was brought into disarray after he killed the Greek gods, but looking back maybe it was just the area of Greece. Alternatively, it might have been the Norse gods that stepped in to bring things back into order. Perhaps he inadvertently created them when he unleashed Athena's power on the world after he killed himself. Then there are the questions about the current state of things. Who is the mother of his son's child and where is she? Where did he get his magical axe from? What adventure was Kratos alluding to at the very end when he told his son that he is ready for a new beginning, and how will the Norse gods come into play? We know that the game takes place in Scandinavia in the pre-migration period before the time of the Vikings. The pre-migration period refers to a time when the Norse gods walked the earth instead, so it's pretty obvious that Odin and Loki will be featured in the game and that you will encounter them at some point on Kratos' journey. While the story is being continued in Norse mythology, the gameplay has been reimagined and it looks like it's been completely overhauled. While this has alienated quite a few fans, this is something that I'm completely on board with because after God of War Ascension the formula was starting to show its age. While the Blades of Chaos were the bread and butter of the series, there is only so much you can do with them without making them feel like the same thing every time, so I'm glad they decided to do something completely different. They made a very deliberate decision to go with a new weapon because they said it fits a lot better with a whole new set of buttons and a completely different gameplay system. I initially had quite a few reservations about the axe when I saw it in the concept art, but after seeing it in action I'm a lot more comfortable with it, though I'm unsure whether it will have the same staying power as the Blades of Chaos did. Although Sony Santa Monica has always had a great combat design team, so I'm confident they'll be able to pull it off. The axe itself is said to have a long history, with a story behind it that connects the characters, and while it has a name, they don't want to reveal it just yet. It looks like it has some sort of ice power that can do things like freeze enemies and send powerful shockwaves of ice through the ground. The blades always had this fiery effect, so it's interesting to see them choose ice instead, because it shows how different yet familiar this game is going to be with an older, more redeemed version of Kratos. I love the way that you can throw your axe and then recall it back to you, because it reminds me a lot of the way that Thor uses Mjolnir. Who knows, maybe we might even get to wield Mjolnir one day as a potential upgrade or alternate weapon. I also liked this feature because it demonstrated the new hand-to-hand combat that Kratos can engage in when he doesn't have his axe, and it reminded me a bit of that impactful punching move that he had in Ascension. The camera is no longer fixed like it was in the previous games, and it can be moved freely with the right analog stick now. Fixed cameras don't typically work well in games, yet the God of War games always manage to pull it off masterfully. It's definitely an aspect that I'm going to miss, though I understand why it's not there anymore. They wanted the camera to be closer to the player because it allows for a more intimate experience, especially when you're engaged in combat and you can see the way each of your blows land on enemies. If you look at the top left hand corner, you'll notice his health bar with the Spartan Rage meter in the middle. You'll notice that during a specific scene when his son alerts the deer they're hunting, it starts to fill up as he gets mad and then subsides when he calms himself. So it seems like the meter will serve another purpose outside of combat, which is a first for the series, and it highlights the focus on his struggle with controlling his rage. We also see an arrow below his health bar, which denotes how many arrows his son has. And it looks like it has a rechargeable meter that shows when he can fire arrows charged with lightning. There is an icon of an axe on the right and something else on the left which I can't make out though. I think it's to do with being able to switch between different weapons when you acquire new ones later on in the game, but I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments below if you have any suggestions. The mini boss fights with the troll reminded me a bit of Dark Souls, especially with the new dash mechanic that Kratos has, and the combats looked slower but more methodical. It looks like he can also roll to evade attacks like he could in the previous games. The game showcased its buddy system, which looks a bit similar to the one in The Last of Us, since his son can also get involved in combat and help deal some damage. They have even dedicated an entire button to him, which can be used for various things depending on the context. These include combat, traversal, puzzle solving, and exploration. So even though it was said that we will control Kratos throughout the entire game, we can also passively control his son. The narrative skeleton of the game will be all about the teaching that goes on from father to son, which will be translated into gameplay as his son gets better at doing the things that you teach him, like firing his bow. It's very reminiscent of The Last of Us, but it looks like they are attempting to create an even stronger interaction between the player and the NPC character. There is an awesome fan theory out there right now that says that his son is actually Thor, hence why they don't want to reveal his name. Zeus is his grandfather after all, and he has lightning arrows that can be used in combat. If you look at this part of the demo here in slow motion, you'll notice a hooded figure, and then a few seconds later he disappears. It is speculated that these hooded figures are watchers for Odin, who plans to kidnap Kratos' son, which is what gives him the reason to fight the Norse gods. When Corey said that the game is about Kratos teaching his son how to be a god, I thought he was talking metaphorically, but there might be more meaning to this than we initially thought. It is just a fan theory at the end of the day, so it might end up being nothing more than a load of baloney. The hooded figure might even be Athena instead. So with everything in mind, it looks like they won't be killing off his son at the beginning of the game, which is a relief because they have already killed his family before and the story of revenge has already been done. So he'll be with Kratos throughout most of the game, and Kratos alluded to this when he told his son that he is ready for a new beginning. Plus, industry insider Shinobi602 kind of hinted at Kratos not being the only protagonist in the game, which means that his son will probably also play a huge part. After many failed attempts to try and figure out what the troll said to Kratos, I only managed to make out the word Valhalla. It turns out that he is speaking in ancient Norse, which only his son understands, so he will also be a translator for you. After looking it up, it turns out that he told Kratos that he won't cross into Valhalla, which indicates that he is going after the Norse gods and that they know that he is on his way. The fight with the troll itself did a good job at showing Kratos' varied moveset. However, it did get a bit scripted from the moment he activated the Spartan Rage, which was previously known as the Rage of Sparta in the previous games. It's obvious that it's a very early part of the game though, so perhaps they made it a scripted event so that it can function as a tutorial and just to show off the game. It is just a gameplay teaser at the end of the day, and it was said that they have lots more to show. Apparently QuickTime events will not be included in the same way they were in the previous games as well, and they are aiming for a more player controlled experience. So I am sure the combat is going to have a lot more depth to it. It also seems like there will be an elemental nature to the game. All of the enemies he fought in the demo represented fire, with Kratos now being ice and his son having lightning. The press were assured at E3 that the series is not going to be abandoning its bombastic cinematic roots, and that we can still expect massive action set pieces that blow our mind. They said they didn't want to focus the demo on showing this instead, because the studio has already proven that they know how to do it well, which is true when you think about it. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like the opening of God of War 3. They added that they wanted to surprise fans with something unexpected in the form of a demo that was quieter and more character driven. The troll fight is just a small version of what we can really expect. If I'm being honest, my only real disappointment was the lack of gore. The God of War series has always been known for its gruesome finishes, from pulling eyes out to spreading intestines everywhere. So I was expecting to see a much more gruesome end to the troll, but the camera cut away from his face when Kratos delivered the killing blow. Maybe it was to make the demo more suitable for the conference, but that's never stopped them before, so I doubt that's the reason. While I really like the changes they've made so far, I really hope this isn't one of them. It also looks like it's going to have some sort of RPG progression system, which is also a first for the series. How character progression manifests itself is still in development, but it was said that you can upgrade both Kratos and his son. The closest thing we previously had to this was collecting blood orbs to upgrade all of the different weapons, as well as Gorgon eyes and Phoenix feathers for increasing your health bar and magic bar respectively. Experience points were gained for both tracking and archery, which leads me to think that there might be progression trees for different aspects, like exploration and combat. Speaking of exploration, based on the way that you can discover locations, it seems like the game is going to have a quasi-open world nature to it with connected hub areas like the Tomb Raider games. So while it's not going to be open world, it is certainly going to be a much bigger game than the previous ones were. For example, before Kratos makes a left here, it looks like you can also go straight into what looks to be a tunnel that leads somewhere else. Apparently the world will be full of hidden paths, secret nooks and collectibles, and if you explore enough, you'll be able to find things like crafting resources and pieces of armor. It was also great to see the Norse world brought to life with enemy designs that we have never seen before in a God of War game. The lava creatures and the troll looked fantastic. The former are known as Dragas, and they are described as the skeletal warriors of the Norse world. Furthermore, if you look at the background of this image from the 6-minute 45 mark here, you'll notice some sort of fairy creature flying off to the right, and this could be a Valkyrie, who are essentially the helping spirits of Odin. We saw a dragon in the distance at the end of the demo as well, which looked awesome, and I wouldn't be surprised if they gave us a big boss fight with one. So overall, it looks like we'll be getting a more mature, grounded story with a level of depth to Kratos that we have never really seen before, thanks in part to the introduction of his son. My favourite character moment was probably at the very end, when Kratos missed the opportunity to pat his son on the back and open up to him. It shows that even though he has learned to control his rage, he is still a very flawed character, which I honestly really like because it would be very boring otherwise. He never had a father figure, and he survived the rigorous Spartan training of the Agogi, so while he has the strength to take down an entire pantheon of gods, it's interesting to see him struggle with making an emotional connection to the ones that he loves. It was said that God of War will be released soon, but not this year. It wasn't flat out denied that it would be coming in March of next year, and God of War games usually come out in March, but I think it's a safer bet to assume it's a holiday 2017 game based on what we saw, so it's going to be a little bit more far off than what I expected. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this bold new direction for the God of War series, as I would love to see what you guys think. In the meantime, keep it locked to this channel for everything on God of War. I'm super excited about this one, and I'm really happy this series has finally made its comeback. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.